Welcome to the course overview of MKTG2001 Marketing Research. In this recording, I will be going through the description of the course, the learning outcomes, and how the assessment items relate to the learning outcomes and also the content of this course. So the marketing research subject is basically about using evidence, creating evidence, and using it in useful and systematic ways in order to be able to solve marketing problems. And in terms of evidence, we cover the gamut from academic or scientific literature, secondary sources, and then we also do primary data collection. And in doing this, we'll be applying qualitative and quantitative methods and analysis techniques in order to find the answers that we need as marketers in order to be able to implement the best marketing strategies. One other thing, just to be aware that there are requisites to this course, so you either need to have completed MKTG 2004 Marketing or MKTG 2031 Consumer Behaviour. There is statistics in this subject, however, it is basic statistics and it is taught at a level for beginners, but I am just flagging it now just so you are aware. So the learning outcomes of this subject relate heavily to the application of the research process. So we start with, in this subject, we're going to be doing a project for a real client. And in doing that, you will need to be able to identify the marketing problem that the client has, choosing the methodologies that are appropriate to get the evidence to solve the marketing problem. These need to be done in an ethical way. We need to retrieve and collect primary and secondary data. You need to be able to understand the methodological quality, reliability, and validity of the various data that we collect. You need to be able to integrate all these different types of data, be able to analyze them in a systematic way in order to develop solutions towards the marketing problem, and also find solutions with support of evidence to present to the client. And finally, you need to be able to produce an evidence-based marketing report for the client in order for them to be able to implement strategies going forward. So the assessment overview for the marketing research subject is available in Wattle and also in the course outline. I suggest that you read it very carefully, as the course outline is your contract with me and the university. So if there's any issues that you have with due dates or conflicts or there's inconsistencies, please raise them as soon as you possibly can with me. So in terms of the assessment items, there are three broad categories. However, the first two, the research project tutorial participation, are closely related. So these two assessment items relate to the implementation of the project itself. So whereas the quizzes is designed to basically test as on an individual level your understanding of the content areas. So quizzes is content, research project and participation is about application. So the project itself has 5 different parts, which I will create videos explaining in more detail, but essentially the two main bits are the research proposal, which is due week 6. This incorporates the first part of the research process, so the problematization, the research questions, and the methods, proposed methods that you will be using. And the research report includes those 3 sections, plus the findings and conclusions and recommendations. those 2 bits of assessment are done as a group, whereas the third assessment item, the project task, is done as an individual. And these are subsets of activities that need to be done throughout the research process, but an individual member of the group will be responsible for one of these tasks. The research presentation is the oral reporting of results at the end of semester. So essentially it will incorporate an overview of the entire project in a presentation form. And the final piece of assessment relates to the group components, and essentially it is there to make sure that all members of the group are contributing to the proposal and reports as they are due. Please note that while peer evaluation doesn't have a grade in of itself, each one, the one that's due week 6 and the one that's due week 12, relate to the proposal and the report, and that differential grades may be awarded for the proposal and report depending on how your group evaluates your performance. The participation assessment item requires active participation in class activities and discussion. Those class activities and discussions are essentially doing the research process. So you need to be engaged every week in order to have a good class participation mark. Just be aware that you actually need to be in class to participate, and that if you see the class activity schedule on Wattle, you'll also see that you will be required to do some preparation tasks before class that we will then be looking at in class as part of the activities. And finally, the quizzes. There are 3 quizzes throughout semester. They focus on content of the course and your knowledge of that content. So there's one in week 5, week 8, week 11, and the topics that they cover are also included there. So in terms of integrating these assessment items into the content areas. So if you've seen the introduction to the marketing research lecture that I have posted on Wattle, you'll see that researching involves 5 steps. So we need to determine the scope of the marketing research, select the research methods, collect and prepare the data, analyze the data, and transform the results into information. So this relates to our research projects, or the content of what we're going to be covering each week in the following ways. So in terms of determining the scope for the marketing research, we'll be doing this essentially in weeks 1 and 2 of semester. You'll have a brief overview of the client's problem that they have provided in a written form in week 1. The client will present their problem to the class in week 2, and we'll be finalizing the problem identification, research questions, and looking at how literature and secondary sources are integrated into this process in week 2 as well. In step 2, we have to select the research methods. So we've broken these up into week 3, where we do the qualitative method selection, and then in week 5, we look at the quantitative method selection. The third steps, which is collecting and preparing the data. Qualitative data collection and analysis we will be covering in weeks 3 and 4. Quantitative data collection preparation is being done in weeks 5 to 7. The actual data collection for quantitative data will happen in weeks 8 and 9, which leads into step 4, which is analysing the data. So for qualitative analysis, we'll be doing that in week 4. And for quantitative analysis, when we get into the statistics, we'll be doing that in weeks 7 to 10. And finally, transforming the results into information. This will be done in class and in your final report that is submitted in week 12, and we'll cover how to present data in week 11. So as you can see that this is a very, very busy schedule. There is no time or leeway for delay. Otherwise, we will not be able to prepare complete reports by the end of semester. So in terms of the output, so the complete report is on the right-hand side here with the green dots. So a marketing research report includes an introduction, the theoretical framework, method, data collection, findings, conclusions, recommendations, limitations, suggestions. So as we go through each of the steps and each of the weeks, we are addressing one of these output areas. So as we go through the subject, you'll be building into your final reports. So step 1, so that weeks 1 and 2, these relate to the first 2 parts of the final report of introduction and theoretical framework. Step 2, where we do the qual and quant method selection, the outputs of this go into the method section of the final report. The collection and preparation of the data goes into the data collection section. The analysis of the data goes into the findings section. And finally, transformation into information is the reporting of the whole thing, but also includes the conclusions, the recommendations, limitations, and suggestions for further research. So in terms of the first 2 bits of research report, that is the group-based submissions. So we have the proposal and we have the report and presentation. So there is an overlap between these 2. So the proposal includes the introduction, the theoretical framework, and the method, while your report and presentation will cover all of these stages. The difference between the 2 is that the proposal is written in the future tense, as in we plan to do these methods or we propose to do these methods, whereas in the report you will state that we did these methods. Other than that, the proposal also gives the opportunity for feedback for the first 3 sections of the report. So in marking the proposal, you'll be given feedback which you can then take to improve these sections that then appear again in your final report and presentation. The research task, which is these individually assigned activities that you will be required to do as an individual member of your group, which feed into either your group's report or into the research project overall. So the first research task comes under the determining the scope of the marketing research. It relates to identifying the problem and the theoretical framework of the marketing problem. The next 3 relate to data collection and analysis. So research task 2 relates to qualitative data collection and is an initial analysis of the qualitative data in terms of building consumer profiles. Research tasks 3 and 4 relate to quantitative data collection. Task 3 requires you to develop the protocols and the supplementary material required in order to collect the quantitative data, while task 4 is the design of the instrument that will be used in collecting the quantitative data. Whether it be a survey, an experiment, there is some sort of questionnaire or a quantitative instrument that is required to collect the data. And finally, research task 5 relates to analysis, and this is developing up a plan for each research question. How are we going to do the analysis? What data is going to be required? And what tests are going to need to be done to answer the research questions. So each of these stages or each of these tasks builds onto the next step of the research process. So research task 1 builds into the theoretical framework and also into methods. Research task 2, the qualitative analysis, will help with theoretical framing of the data, but also form part of the findings section. Research tasks 3 and 4, well, research task 3 builds onto research task 4, and also the research task 2 can also build into research task 4, which is the design of the instrument. So these are all related together, and all of these data collection methods can become part of the data that research task 5 needs to build a plan for. So, bringing it all back to our learning outcomes. So, in terms of the output areas, you have the introduction theoretical framework relates to learning outcome 1. Method section relates to learning outcome 2. Data collection relates to outcomes 3 and 4. The findings section relates to outcome 5. These additional sections of conclusion, recommendations, limitations, suggestions relates to learning outcome 6. And the ability to communicate effectively in your report, proposal, and presentation relates to learning outcome 7. So these are how all of these bits of assessment relate to each other in terms of achieving the learning outcomes that as they apply to application of the research process. So that's it in terms of overview of our marketing research subject and assessment items and how these are integrated together to achieve our learning outcomes.